How are you, Kaya?
Baruch Hashem. Baruch
Oh,
Hashem.
my sister said she saw you in the market.
I was so happy to see her. I gave her a little advice on what to make.
Oh, okay.
Lovely person. You know what? She brings back memories.
Oh my gosh.
Each time I see her and I see you, it's like a flashback from so many years ago.
I know. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How are you doing?
Eh, eh, eh.
You look good.
You know what? A shaitel and a touch of makeup for a woman, it's everything.
That's true.
Seriously. And you know what? When I put on a nice dress, people don't believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not easy because I for the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I've been getting chemotherapy and radiation at the same time.
Oh no.
So how much can the body take? Do you understand? It's like
Yeah.
it's a lot. It really is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So
Baruch Hashem that we have all these things.
yes, I agree. I agree. That's why somebody told me that if Chas v'Shalom, I was diagnosed with that 25 years ago, I would not be here. Yes,
Yeah.
that is correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to say Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Yes, yes. And you know what?
And also, not only that, that we're in a city that we have such good hospitals.
You are so right. You're so right. This is so important. So important. Yes, that's correct. So are they joining in? I haven't been here in a long time.
Yeah, yeah. What time? Oh, wait.
It's it's 8 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be coming.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't do Ezra. I listened on and off, but I did it a little bit on my own. But Nechemia, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. That's
Right, right.
Yeah.
You know, they have also the OU Women's Initiative. They have wonderful speakers, and there's the Naomi.
Yes.
So it's also very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Baruch Hashem,
Yeah.
my husband's not well, so
Yeah, I
it's
know.
a challenge.
It's a major challenge. It
It's
is
a
a
challenge.
major challenge. Yes.
But
Yeah, I know that.
so yum yum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good days and some days not as good.
So I'll tell you what I do with my grandson who goes to who lives in Connecticut, who goes
Yeah,
to bicultural.
right.
I learn with him on my own.
Oh, nice.
And you know what? I told him that they speak in Avara Sfaradit, which is good for me because, that's. So I told him, you know what, Charlie, you're my chavruta.
Sorry, I had stopped it. I'm sorry.
Okay. So again, we are on Sefer Ezra, Perek Yud, pasuk Yud Ches 18. And the Ezra was very upset with the Jewish people. He gave them musar about marrying Gentile wives. And the people responded, and they got rid of their Gentile wives and the children that they had from those wives. The pasuk in Yud Ches tells us, "Vayimatzei midnei kohanim asher hoshivu nashim lechros." Even there were kohanim that had married Gentile women. Now remember, kohanim have much stricter rules as to who they can marry. They can't marry a divorcee. They can't marry a giores. Certainly not a woman that had not converted. And these women had not converted. So there were Kohanim b'nei Yeshua ben Yotzadak ve'achav, who was Yoshua Kohen Gadol and his brothers. Their names were Maseya, Eliezer, Yariv, Ugedalia. Vayitnu yadam lahotzi neshehem. And they were advised to get rid of their wives as well. Va'ashemim eltson al ashmata. And they were required to bring an asham, a korban, because of their sin. Now we have to understand. When you marry a Gentile woman, there is no korban to bring. So all of the Meforshim get involved here in discussing what kind of korban was this? Why did they bring a korban? So let me, Rashi, Horat Shah Haita. Horat Shah means it was a rule that was passed for that generation. It means it's a new rule that was established by the rabbis of that, and we have examples of that. Probably the most famous one was when Rabbi Yehuda Nossi decided to write down the oral law into the Mishnah. The oral law, there was a negative prohibition not to write down the oral law. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi in his day decided if we don't write it down, the Torah Shabbat is going to be forgotten. We're all in exile. And he made a harasha, Eis lasos Hashem eferu sarasecha. Now's the time to do it. So Rashi tells us that this is another example, that the rabbis under certain conditions temporarily suspend the Torah law. And here, even though it's normally they don't bring a korban for marrying Gentile women, here they said they have to bring a korban. Now, the Malbim goes through to say that it was not a hirasha. Jews were allowed to purchase Eved Knani and Shivcha Knanis. They could purchase non-Jewish slaves, male and female. The male was Eved Knani, the female was Shivcha Knani. The male had to undergo circumcision, and he had to keep all mitzvot like a woman keeps mitzvot, meaning any mitzvah, they were potter from mitzvah saseh shazman grama, like women are potter. They are goyim, though. You're not allowed to marry them. When the Jew gave the Eved Knani a what's called a get shichrur, he freed the Eved. Part of that freedom was they became Jews. There was a conversion where they went into the mikvah and they accepted the rest of the Taryag mitzvos. And that could happen both for an Eved Knani and a Shivcha Knani. So this is different than an Eved Ivri. Of course, an Eved Ivri is Jewish. And a Jew who owed money and could not pay his debt could be sold to the person who he owed money to, but that sale was for 6 years only. And after 6 years, he paid off his debt, and then he went free. There were Jews, Eved Ivris, who decided they liked their life as an Eved Ivri. They wanted to stay permanently. So that Eved Ivri would have to be taken to the doorpost and a hole made in his ear. That was called a nirtza. And he would stay until Yovel. So technically he could stay for as long as almost 50 years. If he was originally sold as an Eved Ivri in the beginning of the Yovel cycle. Now, back to the Shivcha Knanis. A owner of the Shivcha Knanis could give that Shivcha to either an Eved Knani, according to one opinion, as a wife. There's another opinion in the Gemara that the Shrifcha Knanis could be given to an Eved Ivri, to a Jewish slave, as a wife. Normally, you would not be able to have relations with a non-Jewess, even a Shifcha Knanis. They have not undergone conversion. But a Shifcha Charufa that was betrothed to an Eved Ivri, according to the opinion that the Eved that she could be given to as an Eved Ivri, then you could live with her. Now, if someone had relations with this Shifcha Charufa, this Shifcha Knanis that was given over sort of in a betrothal to either an Eved Knani or an Eved Ivri, you violated a law. You'd have to bring a Korban Osham. So according to the Malbim, these Kohanim had relations with Shifcha Knanis, who had been given over as a Shifcha Charufa. And there is a machlokas in Masechta Krisus, Daf 11a, two opinions. The minority view is that this Shifcha Knanis is given to a non-Jewish slave. The majority opinion, which is brought by the Rambam and Rashi and Vayikra, that this Shifcha Knanis is given to an Eved Ivri, to a Jew. So why did Rashi say here that this is a Hirosha? Because Rashi is of the opinion that when the Jews came back from Babylonia, there was no.
He was in an accident in their driveway.
There was no institute of Eved Ivri anymore.
Are you on?
Because according to Rashi, there was no Yovel. The last Yovel occurred when before the Bayis Rishon was destroyed. And there was no institution of Yovel. If there's no institution of Yovel, you can't have an Eved Ivri. Because like I explained, if the Eved Ivri wanted to stay forever, he would never be able to be released. So you can't have, the majority of the opinion of the Gemara, that a Shifcha Charufa could only be given to an Eved Ivri, that could not have occurred in this time of Ezra. That's why he says it's a Hirosha. Now, Rav Chizda, who said in the Gemara that these Kohanim brought it as an Asham, well, that could work according to the minority opinion in the Gemara, that a Shifcha Knanis could be given to an Eved Knani. Because the institution of Eved Knani did exist in Bayis Sheni. So that would work in the time of Ezra, that they would have to bring a Korban Osham for that reason. So that's just an interesting machlokas regarding why they ended up bringing Korbanos. Okay. Any comments, questions about this episode? No. So, pasuk Chaf, till the end of the Perek, gives us all the names of those Jews that had married non-Jewish wives. I think we said last time there were 96. So, if you think about it, remember 43,000 people came back with Ezra. So you're talking about a pretty small group, right? Umibnei Imer Hanani Uzvadia. Umibnei Charam Masei Elia Shmaya Yechiel Vuzia. Mibnei Pashchur Elioeni Masea Yishmael Nesanel Yozavid Velasha. This concludes the list of the Kohanim. Umin Alvim, Yozavad V'Shimi, V'Kel Yahu Klita, Ptachya Yehuda V'Eliezer. Umin HaMeshorari, among the Leviim who were the choir singers, Elioshiv. Umin HaShoarim, the gatekeepers, Shalom, Telem, Ve'uri. So we've taken care of the Kohanim and the Leviim, but there were also Yisraelim, Umi Yisrael, Mimnei Parosh, Ramya, Vizio, Malkio, Miyamin, Velazar, Malkio, Vnaya. Umibnei Ela, Matanya, Zachariah, Vichiel, Va'avdi, Viremot, Ve'elia. Umibnei Zaitu, Elionei, Eliashiv, Matanya, Viremot, V'zavad, Va'aziza. From this Umibnei Bevai, from the sons of Bevai, Yehochanan, Chananya, Zabai, Atlai. Umibnei Bani, Mishulam, Maluch, Va'adya, Yashuvu, Sha'al, V'ramot. Ubibnei Pachat Moab, the governor of Moab, who was Jewish. Adna Uklal, Benaya, Maseya, Matanya, Betzalel, Uvinui, Umnasha. Uvnei Charim, Eliezer, Yoshia, Malkiah, Shmaya, Shimon. Binyamin, Maluch, Shmarya. Mimnei Chashum, Matnai, Matata, Zavad, Elifelet. Yeremai, Menashe, Shimi. Mivnei Bani, Madam, Amra, Uyel. Benaya, Vedya, Kuluhu. Uniya, Meremot, Eliashiv. Matanya, Matnai, Veyasai. Uvani, Uvinui, Shimi. Shelmaya, Venatan, Vadaya. Mechad, Nevai, Shashai, Sharai. Azarel, Vishelmayu, Shmarya. Shalom, Amaria, Yosef. From the sons, Mibnei Nevo, Yiel, Matityahu, Zavad, Zvina. Yadai, V'yoel, Bnaya. Kol Ela, all of these, Nasu Nashim Nochriat, the all married Gentile wives. V'yesh Mahem Nashim, Vayasimu Banim. Some of these wives they had children with. Everybody was expelled. The alien wives and the children. It's not mentioned here, but that's what Chazal tell us.
Isn't that a bit strange? You throw out all your kids. I don't know.
They were not connected to you. If it's born of a Jewish mother, if it's born of a non-Jewish mother, the child is not Jewish.
Not Jewish.
And he's not
No, I
related.
get that, but it's still the father's child.
He's not related to you. He's not legally considered the son of his Jewish father. He, in effect, lacks a father.
Yeah. I don't know. Immaculate conception. I don't know. Weird.
So why did they allow the marriage of Jewish men to non-Jewish women?
Nobody allowed it. There was no Ezra. There was no religious authority that gave them a problem to do it. When Ezra came back and was given authority by Darius, the Persian king, to remember, he was given instructions. You have to be the legislator of Torah law. He wasn't given political law. He was said, get them in shape regarding their religious law. So this is the first thing that Ezra took care of. Now, you notice that we didn't make a seal because really Ezra and Nechemia is one book. We're going to learn again a little bit of what we learned in an introduction to Ezra, but it'll make more sense to us now. Sefer Ezra is the 10th book in Ksuvim. It comes right after Megillas Esther, which is how we learned it. And it comes before Divrei Yomi. This is the order given to us in Baba Basra Daf Yudalit, which is the Mesorah. We're going to see. There is an opinion that Nechemia wrote both Sefer Ezra and Nechemia. Even so, Sefer Ezra was not called Sefer Nechemia. There was a reason for it. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Tzadi Gimel says, Kol mili de Ezra Nechemia ben Chakalia Amrinu. All the words of Sefer Ezra was written by Nechemia. So Nechemia ben Chakalia on my time lo ikri sifra al shmei. So why wasn't at least part of that Sefer Ezra was not called by Nechemia? And we're going to see, up until the year 1500, even Nechemia, the part that we just finished 10 prakim in Ezra. Nechemia has 12 prakim. Up until 1500, when any pasuk in Nechemia was referenced, it was called Sefer Ezra. So it wasn't even called Sefer Nechemia. So really, there is an opinion in the Gemara that both Ezra and Nechemia were written by Nechemia, yet it wasn't called by. It was called not by his name. So the Gemara asked the question: Nechemia ben Chakalia, my time lo ikri sifra al shmei. Why didn't he merit getting the book named after him? He praised himself. We're going to see in Nechemia Perek Hey, Zachra li Elohai letova. Hashem should remember me for good because of all the good things I've done. So the Gemara asks, even David HaMelech in Tehillim Kuf Vav says, Zachreni Hashem beratzon imcha pigdeni b'shuasecha. In a sense, David is asking the same thing, that Hashem should remember him for good. So the Gemara answers, David rachmihu dekavi. David is davening. It's not making a statement. Rav Yosef has another reason why the Sefer is not called Nechemia. Mipnei shesiper bignuson shel rishonim. It said like a little Lashon Hara. It says in Nechemia Perek Hey, V'hapachot harishonim asher lefanai, the Rishonim who were like inferior to me, hichbidu ala am vaychu mehem belechem v'yayin achar kesef shkolim arboim. So v'afal Daniel, he said something bad about Daniel, who was greater than him. So, in a sense, Ezra and Nechemia is one Sefer. Sefer Ezra 10 prakim, and there's 13 prakim in Sefer Nechemia. It's only when they started printing Tanakhs after the Gutenberg Bible, 1450, that we started seeing division, Ezra and Nechemia. And Chazal, there's many examples. Sukkah Lamed Zayin, Chagiga Perigimel. When they bring a pasuk from Nechemia, they say it's Sefer Ezra. Both Rashi, Even Ezra, the Radak, when they bring a pasuk from Nechemia in their other form, they say Katvu b'Sefer Ezra. When you count up how many Sifrei Tanakh there are 24. But that's only when you count Ezra and Nechemia as one book. The Chidasa is something very interesting. That Nechemia, that Rabban Gamliel, so Rabban Gamliel was a very controversial head of the Sanhedrin who lived in Yavne in the year 100. When Titus destroyed the Beis Hamikdash 70 CE, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was taken out of Yerushalayim like in a coffin. And he was able to have a face-to-face meeting with Vespasian, who was Titus's father. And he predicted that Vespasian would become the emperor. And while Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was there, a messenger came from Rome and told Vespasian, the emperor died, you're now the emperor. So Vespasian wanted to grant Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai a favor. What did Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai say? Famous statement. Tein li Yavna v'chachamea. He asked for Yavna. And the Sanhedrin, which had moved out of Yerushalayim, moved to Yavna, where it was until Yavna was destroyed 135 CE during the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Now, Rabbi Gamliel had fights with Rabbi Yehoshua, a great Tana, to the point where the Chachamim deposed Rabbi Gamliel as the Rosh HaSanhedrin. That's why we say the night of the Haggadah, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was 18 years old, and he grew a beard overnight. He says, "Arei ani keven shivim shana." I'm like 70 years old. He was not, he was 18. But because he was now promoted to take Rabbi Gamliel's place, he grew a white beard. So the Chidah says that Rabbi Gamliel was the Gilgul of Nechemia. And therefore, Rabbi Gamliel getting kicked out and being embarrassed was like a takana for Nechemia. It was like a tikkun for Nechemia's soul, who we said was haughty. He praised himself. Ubazeh nitkan cheto shel Nechemia. Therefore, from heaven, later Doirois, the Sefer Nechemia was called Sefer Nechemia. I think that's a fascinating story. In Baba Basra, I told you there's Machlokes who wrote Sefer Ezra. So in Baba Basra it says, Ezra Kosov Sifro. And the Amr Aviram Rav Lo Allah Ezra Mebavel At Yichas Etzmo the Allah. But in Sanhedrin it says, Kol Mila de Ezra Nechemia ben Chakal Yamri. So Rashi explains this contradiction and says that Ezra started Sefer Ezra and Nechemia finished it. But others, the Yad Ramah, the Maharsha says no, that Nechemia wrote the whole thing. Okay, so that's left in a debate. Now, I just want to show you this. This is Dov Zakheim. 20 years ago, Dov Zakheim was in the government. He was like Secretary of Defense or Assistant Secretary of Defense. He has a very nice sefer in English on Nechemia called Statesman and Sage. I want to do a little introduction. Nechemia is known primarily as the architect of the restoration of Yerushalayim. When Ezra, what we've been learning the last 10 prakim, they rebuilt the Beis HaMikdash, but Jerusalem itself was in ruins. The walls that had been broken by Nebuchadnezzar's army had never been rebuilt. So Nechemia restored Yerushalayim at the beginning of Bayis Sheni. It's almost 100 years since Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed the temple. Of course, the kings of Persia had recognized that the Jews in their society yearned to restore the temple. So remember, Koresh allowed them to go back, but then he withdrew their permission. And then eventually, Darius, who was the son of Achashverosh and Esther, again allowed them to rebuild. And not only that, allowed Ezra to bring 42,360 people back with him. But Nechemia, who at this time is the cupbearer for King Darius, He is living in Shushan, in Persia, and he hears about the embattled inhabitants of Yerushalayim. And this caused him deep anguish. He abandoned his position as attendant to the king of Persia. He journeyed to Yerushalayim, and he began to rebuild. He found a vulnerable city. The walls had still burnt. The enemies of the Jews, particularly the Kusim, had been oppressing the Jewish community, disrupting their religious observances. You couldn't mount a meaningful defense because there was no wall. Even though Ezra had brought money, provisions, but it was in short supply. Intermarriage had been rampant. Shabbos observance was lax. Listen to this. There were money lenders lending money with interest. And therefore, there were many, many poor people who couldn't get out and under from the money lenders. So he personally supervised refurbishing the city walls. He organized an effective defense system. He arranged for communal funds to provide income for the temple needs. He made sure all the people complied with Meiser and Truma. He ended mixed marriages, punishing those that had indulged in this. He moved decisively against public desecration of the Shabbos. He closed the gates of the cities to violators. He persuaded the affluent moneylenders to cancel obligations of the poor, relieving them of their crushing burden of debt. He engaged in a ceremony with Ezra to consecrate the revitalized city walls with a festive procession around its reconstructed walls. This was attended by all the distinguished men of the day, as well as the general public, with trumpets, offerings, korbanos. At the start of Bayis Sheni, Nechemia invested the whole period of Bayis Sheni with this special koyach. We remember, this is an era of Persian domination. It's only because the Persian kings allowed it that he was allowed to rebuild the city. I've said a number of times that the Shekhinah did not reveal itself in the same way that it had done during Shlomo HaMelech, right? There were 5 things in Bayis Rishon that did not exist in Bayis Sheni. The Aron HaKodesh, the Kapoires, the fire that came down to consume the korbanos. There was no nevuah. There was no Urim V'Tumim. So, of course, during Shlomo HaMelech, that's the zenith of Jewish Jerusalem, with the Shekhinah, etc. But during Nehemiah's time, the Shekhinah is covered, it's concealed. What is so special about Jerusalem that it bothered Nehemiah so much that he had to come and correct it? It all begins with Yaakov Avinu had a dream about a ladder. The foot of the ladder is in Beersheba. The top of the ladder is in Beit El. And if you draw where the middle point is, it's in Yerushalayim. So what is so special, asked the Ramban, why the center of the ladder had to be in Yerushalayim? So the center is where heaven and earth meet. Beersheba is the earth. Beit El is where Hashem is, the house of God. So the place where there is meeting of Shamayim and Aretz is the halfway point, which is Yerushalayim. And that goes along with the temple. The temple is both the dwelling place for the Shekhinah, and human beings serve the Shekhinah there. I'm going to read, the temple is the single location in the universe specified as a retreat where the divine presence visits and where mortals worship. It belongs equally to both God and man. So the Gur Aryeh, that's why he explains, the Maharal, that the center of the ladder has to be Yerushalayim. This Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash radiated throughout the entire city of Jerusalem. The Rambam in Hilchos Beis HaBechira says, the Mokam HaMikdash and Yerushalayim are holy because of the divine presence. In the dinim related to where you can eat your Meiser Sheni and other things like Bikurim, Yerushalayim itself is considered Machne Yisrael, just like the camp in the Midbar. That's Yerushalayim, not the Beis HaMikdash, equals Machne Yisrael. Now, this connection between the Jewish people and Yerushalayim goes back even further. Avram Avinu, in his time, there were 4 kingdoms that rose, and they conquered Sdom, and they took his nephew Lot prisoner. Avraham leads a force and rescues Lot. When Avram comes back from battle, he is met by Melech Shalem. Umakitzedek Melech Shalem hotzi lechem v'yayin. Chazal tell us Malkitzedek was Shem ben Noah, and he was the king of the city Shalem, which is Yerushalayim. After the Akedah, right, Yereh Shalem became Yerushalayim. Now Malkitzedek brings out lechem v'yayin, bread and wine. This is a siman that eventually Avram's descendants are going to bring menachos and wine as korbanos. These 4 kings that rose up and took Lot prisoner is a remez, says the Ramban, to the 4 Malchios that have subjugated the Jewish people, the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Lot is the great-grandfather of David HaMelech, right? The 2 daughters of Lot have relations with him. Who are they? Moab and Ammon. And Balak Melech Moab is the grandfather of Rus, who is the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. Abraham's conquest of the kingdoms and his rescue of Lot foreshadow the eventual Jewish triumph and return from exile in the time of Mashiach. Even though Lot is not the greatest tzaddik, obvious inside of him is a spark of purity and devotion, which was passed down to David HaMelech. So, Eretz Yisrael is a place of milk and honey. The point was that the land was give Jewish people physical needs and allow them to study Torah and perform the mitzvahs. However, the people indulged themselves. They forsook their devotion to Torah. And that led to the exile. It's when we go back again and use the affluence of Eretz Yisrael to allow us to study Torah and to fulfill the mitzvahs, we will merit redemption. That's this ladder between heaven and earth, the center point, which is Yerushalayim. We're going to see in chapter 10 that he's going to make the Jewish people sign a declaration that they will refrain from intermarriage and they will keep Shabbos and the temple-related mitzvahs. It seems, though, that this keeping Shabbos is connected to the rejuvenation of Yerushalayim. Why? The whole point of Shabbos represents the pleasure of the world to come. Oneg Shabbos requires even material pleasure on Shabbos, eating, drinking. This reminds us of the day of everlasting Shabbos when Mashiach comes. So the Shabbos represents the fusion of body and soul. As we've described, that's really what the point of the Holy City of Jerusalem is. Okay. Let me just see one more introduction that I have here. Okay, we talked about that. We explained why we have Sefer Nechemia today. The Arizal says another thing. I talked to you about Rabban Gamliel, that Nechemia is the Gilgul of Rabban Gamliel, but the Arizal says that, David HaMelech and Bathsheba, their first son, died. And it was only their second son, Shlomo HaMelech. And so the Arizal says that Nechemia was the Gilgul of that son who died. So that son died before he was given a name. He died before he received Milah. And that's why the Sefer of Nechemia never had the name of Nechemia. The gematria of the word shame is Sefer. So he was never Zoicha to have his name called because of this connection. Now, we situated Sefer Ezra in the 8th year of Daryavish ben Achashverosh, which was the 6th year after they had started building the Beis HaMikdash. Right? Because in the 2nd year of Daryavish's rule, that's when he gave permission to the Jews to continue building the Beis HaMikdash. That was built over the next 4 years. That gets us from year 2 to year 6. And then in the 7th year, Ezra was given permission to come up. And in that very same year, Ezra dealt with getting rid of the Gentile wives. We're going to see in the first pasuk of Nechemia that now this is the 12th year another 12 years have gone by, right? Because we were in the 8th year. And now this is the 20th year of Darius's rule. And over this 12 years, that's when Nechemia hears about how much difficulty the Jewish population in Jerusalem is having. There's no walls. There's no defense. And that sort of gets us to where we are here. Let's start the first pasuk. Divrei Nechemia ben Chakalia. These are the words of Nechemia. Vayi b'chodesh Kislev shnas esrim, the 20th year of what? We're going to see most of say it's the 20th year of Darius's reign. Va'ani ayiti b'Shushan abira, and he cites himself in Shushan. He was also known as Hatirshata. There's a debate whether Nechemia and Zerubbabel were the same person. The Rambam, the Meiri, the Abarbanel say that Nechemia and Zerubbabel were not the same person. The Gemara in Sanhedrin 38 says Nechemia was Zerubbabel. By the way, the Malbim says if the Jewish people had merited it, Zerubbabel would have been Mashiach. Because the word Zerubbabel says Nizra Babavel. Therefore, he was conceived there. But as I said, most of the Meforshim say Nechemia and Zerubbabel were not the same person. Nechemia was in Shushan as a servant of the king. Initially, Nechemia had gone to Eretz Yisrael when Koresh allowed him to go. But he left Eretz Yisrael when Koresh pulled back the permission to build bias, to rebuild the bias. So he went back to try to get permission again to build the Beis HaMikdash. That's what he's doing in Shushan again. Pasuk Beis. Vayavo Chanani echad me'achai hu v'nashim Yudah. Chanani, one of my brothers, meaning he came with men from Judea. Ve'eshalem, I asked them, ala Yudim ha'pleita asher nisharu min hashevi v'al Yerushalayim. The remnant Jews who remain. He's going to be told that the protective walls around Yerushalayim are in ruins. Therefore, the Jewish committee is suffering. Now, here's the big question. We just learned that Ezra was the leading Torah sage of the generation. We learned that he was worthy to bring Torah to the Jews if Moshe Rabbeinu had not preceded him. And Ezra was already there. Why did the Jewish committee wait for Nechemia to begin rebuilding the walls of Yerushalayim? And with this, we'll close. The Rimitrani said that Darius only sanctioned Ezra to return to Eretz Yisrael as a religious leader, instructing him to organize religious observance in the Holy Land. Thus, Ezra performed a religious mission sanctioned by the king, nothing more. Nechemia now is the royal representative. He had been the king's cupbearer, a trusted advisor. He comes to Eretz Yisrael as the governor with Persian soldiers, unlike Ezra. Thus, Nechemia came with the support of Persian military power. Ezra did not have political carte blanche. Ezra feared that should he overstep his bounds, the enemies of the Jews would accuse him before the Persian monarch, and that would jeopardize his mission as a Torah leader. So he refrained from any involvement in the construction. Some of these Jewish plated were even Jews who never had gone into exile to Babylonia. Some of them were there even before Koresh. Now, I just want to read from Dov Zakheim's book a little bit as it relates to this. Do you know that etched high on the outer wall of Jerusalem's old city, a few feet from the Jaffa Gate, facing the restored Mamilla district, is a Hebrew inscription? Unusually for a city oriented to Western tourists, it is coupled with translation into Arabic, not English. An English rendering of the transcription would read, on the 20th day of the month of Tevet, the restoration of the old city walls was completed. The repairing of the walls of Jerusalem went forward. This is a quote from Nechemia, Perek Dalet. So Jewish history recognized Nechemia as one of the founding fathers of the Second Commonwealth. He doesn't fit easily into the rabbinic mold of Jewish leaders. Although tradition asserts that he was a member of the Anshe Knesset Agdola, his recollections deal more with practical politics and administration than with scholarship. He certainly respected religious authority. Indeed, he enforced it. But he did so as an educated layman rather than as a rabbinic sage. And therefore, in a sense, Nehemiah is the first modern leader of a Jewish state. He had to cope with an array of challenges that would not be unfamiliar to any senior Israeli official today, which included national security relations with regional neighbors and an international superpower, domestic social economic issues, and the place of religion in the governance of the state. He was modern in the sense that characterizes modern Orthodox Judaism today. He embodied the principle whose Hebrew formulation, Toreim derech eretz, roughly translating into observance and worldliness. It is a principle that has never gone unchallenged, either in Judaism or, for that matter, in other religions. Extreme secularists and assimilation have always been in league with religious zealots to undermine the relevance of Jewish life and law to the changing times and generation. Nehemiah was not a cloistered scholar. Neither, however, was he ready to tolerate deviation from tradition. In cleaving to what the Rambam described 1,500 years later as the balanced path, Nehemiah aroused the enmity of many of his more assimilation contemporaries and the opprobrium of his less tolerant Talmudic heirs. You see, that's where we are in modern Orthodoxy. We get it from the left, and we get it from the right. So, just like we said, a lot of things that we saw in Ezra are relevant to our day, assimilation, intermarriage, etc. Nehemiah also is going to be very appropriate for our times. One more paragraph. In many respects, the course of the events in Ezra and Nehemiah bears considerable resemblance to the fate of the Zionist movement during the first half of the 20th century. In both cases, the governing power, Persia in the ancient past, Britain more recently as the mandatory power governing Palestine, initially offered new hope to the Jewish community. As with Cyrus's proclamation, mixed political motives certainly stimulated the Balfour Declaration in 1917. In both cases, leading lobbyists for the Jewish cause were Jews who were well placed at the highest levels of the non-Jewish government. Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel in ancient times, Chaim Weizmann and Sir Herbert Samuel in the 20th century. In both cases, initial government support for the settlement effort succumbed to other sources of political pressure that threatened to undermine, if not abrogate, the movement to settle the land of Israel with Jews. And in both cases, opposition to Jewish settlement came not only from the indigenous populations, the Shomronim and the Palestinians, but also from its lobbyists in the capital of the governing power. In ancient times, according to various midrashic works, it was none other than Haman, the villain of the book of Esther, that tried to stop the building of the Beis HaMikdash. In the 20th century, it was the equally villainous Mufti of Jerusalem, Amin al-Husseini, who was the only non-German in Hitler's court that was made aware of the final solution. He is the father of Palestinian nationalism, not Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat was 1964, that was created by the KGB. It's a whole discussion how that was created. The Mufti was already during the 1930s and 40s. Both men, Haman and Al-Husseini, openly shared the same objective: to rid the land of Israel of the Jewish people and ultimately to exterminate them. Okay, I think we got off Nechemia with a bang. Any questions, comments, ha'arot? Okay,
Have a good week.
everybody have